we're live. Hello, everyone. My name is Aday Lane, and today I am joined with Halftime Tech to introduce you all to Mr. Rico Anderson, a producer, artist, DJ, musician, and composer. So nice to have you here, Rico.
Nice to be here. Thanks for having me. How's your day?
Um,
How's it going?
Really good, just working, making sure I have
Okay.
everything set for now. So,
Okay. Okay. All right.
is yes. So you love music.
Yes.
So we do have an international audience. Some people are from England, some people from United States. So where are you from?
I'm actually from the nation's capital, Washington, D.C.
Okay, okay,
Yeah,
nice.
I was born and raised in Washington, D.C.
hmm So is that where you were inspired to do music, or did that happen elsewhere?
Yeah, pretty much. I was involved in music, since I was a kid, just always kind of drawn to it. My dad was a musician as well. And then Uh, he actually ended up moving to California when I was like maybe three. So I went to go see him, like a few years later, and he had a band. He was involved in a gospel band, and they were working on the album. So he actually would, take me to the rehearsals and this, that, and the other. And then when they started to record in the studio, I have five other sisters. So when he would take them, they couldn't really, stand being in there for all of that time. But he took me, and I really enjoyed it. I liked it. It's like I kind of like felt at home even as a kid. It didn't bore me. I didn't get frustrated being in there. So and I kind of enjoyed just watching the process because I always liked music and I enjoyed music. But now I was actually getting to see how stuff was being made that was playing on the radio.
Okay, nice. And you
Yeah.
say your dad was a part of the gospel band. What exactly did he do within the group?
He was the guitar player, and he was actually like the producer for his band. So yeah, he had a band called Joy, and this is was out of he stayed in San Diego at the time. So when I went to go visit, like I said, I went to the rehearsals, and then I started going to the sessions, and I guess you could say that's kind of like when that bug really, really, kind of bit me. You know what I mean? And was like, hey, I like this place.
Okay,
So
like
so I
led
was
to
kind of
what you do now and for a long
yeah.
time.
Yeah,
Okay,
like
so I saw you went to Suitland High School Performing Arts.
yeah. Now the interesting thing about that is I didn't go for music.
Oh, what did you want? What did you?
No, I actually went for drama.
Wow.
So I was actually a theater major
Mm-hmm.
for the time that I was there. I went there. I was there for 3 years,
Mm-hmm.
and when I graduated as a theater major. But the funny part was is that even though I was a theater major, I always hung out in the music department with all of the musicians and all of them. So even when they were, practice for gigs and stuff, I would be at all of their practices. I would go to the gigs. So I just kind of was still, drawn to that, even though I got into the school by way of the drama department.
I studied theater in college myself. Like,
Okay, okay.
that's-
That's
so do
really
you
cool.
feel like,
You're a
being
fellow thespian, huh?
like,
All right, all right.
so do you
Okay.
feel like, studying in a performing arts school, you feel like that laid the foundation to where you develop the skills for, being in the music industry as
Yeah,
well as
I definitely think that people that attend those type of schools that you definitely get a different kind of preparation than maybe the average person. I guess unless maybe let's say that if someone in your family does that and you're just brought up around it, but just for
Mhm.
the average person that just has an interest that wants to get into it, um, going to a performing arts school, it was I was inspired to go by the movie Fame. When I saw the movie Fame, I was like,
Okay.
yo, I want to go there. You know what I mean? So when they had a school in my area, because at this point we were living in Maryland, which is right outside of DC. So the DC Performing Arts School is actually Duke Ellington, and that's where Dave Chappelle attended there.
Mhm.
And but they opened up one in Maryland that was called it was already an existing high school called Student High School, and then they just added in other departments and other schools within the school, and one of the schools was a performing arts school. So
Wow.
I ended up auditioning and going, and like I said, I ended up getting in by way of the drama department. So
Wow. So you really had
but
the
it was
same things. Yeah.
yeah, but it was interesting because you figure we did a lot of productions, and all of the departments would come together in order for us to pull off what we needed to do. You figure the art department would design the sets, the music department, if it was a musical or whatever, they would take care of all of that. So, like I said, I ended up spending a lot of time with the music teacher that was there, a lady by the name of Mary Cole. She was real influential, I think, for a lot of us kids, because even though we were young, she she had a very no nonsense type policy, and she made you kind of be accountable in an adult manner. Her thing was this: on time is late. You know what I
Right.
mean? So if rehearsal is this time, on time is late. That's how she kind of, conditioned us and a bunch of the other kids, that were there. She kind of conditioned us to just be that way and be ready to be, professional at all times. It's like going to school then, it was kind of like, because it was a specialized school, they picked kids up from all over the county. So I
Hmm.
used to have to be up at like 5:30 in the morning to catch the bus, because the bus had to go all over and pick people up just to get there. So it was like a couple hours that you would just be on the bus to get there. Then the regular school would let out, let's say 2:30, but then you had your performing arts classes that you would have to stay to like 4:30, and then if it was a production, then that would go to 6:30, and then when you would get down to maybe like the last week and a half before showtime, the rehearsals would go to maybe 10, 11, 12 o'clock at night. so so this was high school.
Okay. So, but it's like giving you a lot of, discipline and,
Yeah,
that
yeah.
time as well as doing music, but also learning all the aspects outside of, what makes a production comes together.
hmm
That's great. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah.
That's
So,
very,
like I said, I think it really helped a lot. And even though I didn't pursue drama, it still, the training and the lessons that you learn from it, you still could transfer it into whatever area you want to go in. And for me, it was music.
okay. So outside of performing arts, was there anything else that you wanted to do as a kid that you thought that you would end up doing?
Nah, believe it or not, I was
Okay.
one of these. It was one of these things where I was just kind of into music, and I knew I wanted to do something in that direction. So it
Mhm.
was kind of like you just kind of participate in, like I said, anything entertainment. You get involved in, you know, performing arts here, or this, that, and the other, and it was kind of like, it wasn't really until, let's say, like around the mid '80s, where hip hop really started, like really bubbling, and it was kind of like, now you could look at where you thought you would fit in. So let's just say you was a person that you was always into poetry. A lot of those people ended up turning into rappers.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
You
Yeah.
see what I'm saying? And then you was in the art. A lot of those guys ended up being graffiti writers.
Hmm.
You always like to dance or whatever. They ended up being b-boys, break dancers, whatever. And then some people that was either, just really into music, as far as like people that really, listen to a lot of records or shop for records or this, that, and the other, or even people that were musicians. They kind of gravitated either to the DJ or the production side of that. So,
Okay. So growing up in a performing arts school, and we know artists like Boyz II Men, Jasmine Sullivan,
mhm.
um, by the name of the Roots, but you also have feet in the gospel area. So do you think it's like fundamental for artists to contribute or grow up in one of these areas to make them like a long
Yeah,
lasting
yeah. I
part?
tell people all the time, like if you're working with, younger singers, and it's like, well, they may need some vocal classes. And well, where can I go? I'm like, well, the best place to get free vocal classes, go to church.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? You bound to, it's gonna be somebody there that that knows something, and you got a bunch of people that's there. So you learn a lot of different things, from a lot of people. So you get more than one perspective, and to kind of help and shape you. And that's why you have so many, great dynamic singers that come from the church background, because it's not just one person that was necessarily training them. They had a whole bunch of people that poured into them.
Mhm. So were there any so what were your like the artists at the time when you were growing up? Who were your inspirations at the time?
Well, for me, Michael Jackson was he was the biggest thing, going. I mean, and I always liked him, of course. I mean, I like Prince. Um, I mean, when you said little, I guess, would be Michael Jackson, the Jackson Five then. And then once I got a little bit older, still, Michael as a solo artist,
Hmm.
Prince, Stevie Wonder. By then, New Edition had come along. So then we had Run DMC, different, the Houdini, the Fat Boys, a lot of the early hip hoppers, that had come out and put records out. So all of them were, really, really, influential as far as just like the music that I liked. You know what I'm
Hmm.
saying? Yeah. Now, as far as getting into making music per se, I would say that I started to you started to be able to identify producers because you started to see Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis and Janet Jackson's videos. You started, and then on the hip hop side, you would see Herbie Lovebug and Salt and Pepper's videos, or you see Marley Marl and the Juice Crew videos and things of that nature. So it was like that role was starting to where at one point you were kind of just read the name on the back of the cover and you didn't really have a face to unless like Quincy Jones you knew as far as a guy that it was the producer and the face that was on the cover, but a
Hmm.
lot of other people that were you know like bigger producers you may not necessarily knew who the exactly who they were, because at one point they didn't really have music videos, and then when those videos came out and as they went along, like I said, you started to see more of the producers, actually being in videos and things of that nature. And then even like in hip hop, the DJ being included in the visual part of it, because if you look at like Run DMC's first cover, Jam Master Jay's not even on there.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? But later on, he was added into that. So just like I said, those two roles were kind of as they were defined in the culture, it became kind of clearer to other people that were interested in getting into it, where they could fit in and what they could do.
Okay.
hmm
So did you want to cater more to being an artist or being behind the scenes working with other
Well,
artists?
it was like I kind of like I would say that I was in a rap group, right? But I was the DJ and the producer of the group, so it kind of you was in there, kind of like as an artist, but you still, was the DJ was still, on the turntables in the back. You're not necessarily out in the front, in the front of the camera and everything like that. So I kind of like that middle, space right there. I never wanted to, that's the funny thing. I never really wanted to be a rap. You know,
Okay.
you, that wasn't. It was like that's cool, but I would work with rappers all the time. I would coach rappers. I would, write stuff with rappers and, help them do their stuff. So I knew that I knew how to do it, but that's just what I just didn't want to do that part of it. I really liked what really got me into the DJ, like the whole scratching and everything was, it's a video by Public Enemy called Night of the Living Bassheads. And
Hmm.
Terminator X is on there, scratches, bass, bass, bass. And I remember, like watching that video as a kid, like it was yesterday. I looked at that, and then the first thing that came to my mind, I said, I gotta learn how to do that.
Mhm.
I could do that. And then it was funny because it was like days later, I bumped into a guy that, had moved into the neighborhood. And I think he was from Philly. And he ended up having turntables in his house. And he kind of showed me the basic mechanics of, how to grab the record and, what to do. And then from there, it was just kind of like it just kind of took over
Little.
at that point. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was the same way with the production. It was kind of like all in the same summer. All of that showed up at the same time.
And you're still a teenager at this point, or
Yeah,
you're old?
this is I would say like maybe like 13, 14.
14.
Yeah, like
Okay.
13. Yeah, like around 13, I would say. Yeah.
Okay. So what was that like, you just graduated high school. What was that
Mhm.
next step for you? Some kids go to college, some kids start working.
You know
What was
what? I was really trying to figure out exactly like what I really wanted to do because it's kind of like when you're going to performing arts school, you're involved in art stuff. There,
your
focus.
audio is cutting out.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, now I
It's
can.
better.
Yeah, it was
Oh,
going out for a little.
okay,
Yeah.
okay. I was saying that your focus is on, they keep your focus on you concentrating on your art and your craft. But
Right.
now, once you graduate and you out of there, everybody tell you, okay, this is the real world. You gotta get a job. You gotta
Mhm.
do this stuff. You know. So I started going to school. I was going to UDC, um, in
Okay.
UDC, and I was just trying to just kind of figure out,
I was breaking up.
what's going on.
It sounds like robot.
Does it sound better? No, I
Now it
don't know.
does.
It's better.
Yes. Now it's lagging a little.
It's lagging. Oh,
Yeah.
is it the connection?
Okay, now it's perfect now.
Perfect.
Yes. Good.
You sure? Okay.
Yeah. I can hear
All
you.
right.
Yes. You just say what you just said.
Okay. All right. So, help me out. Where was I? I forgot
You
where
were
we were.
at, you just graduated high school and figuring out what
Right,
you
right.
want
So
to do.
I was at UDC and pretty much just trying to figure out where I was, gonna go and what I was gonna do. And the interesting thing, it was kind of like they had this particular year. It was like a student takeover of the school, and then, they kind of shut the whole school down for like a couple of weeks. So I kind of gotten used to not, really, going to school, just being home, and
Right.
kind of in that interim, kind of like in that same time period, um, I ended up, I was going to a meeting to meet with some people about working on some production for artists that they had, and we were going to a studio to check it out, and then after that, we ended up going to get something to eat. So it's kind of later that evening. And somehow, some way, even though, we started out on one side of town, we ended up way on another side of town, looking for somewhere to get something to eat. And we ended up at an IHOP this particular
Okay.
night. So, and at that IHOP, that's when I ended up meeting Michael Bivins.
Hmm.
And I met him that night. He'd come in. I had my back to the door, and I heard somebody say, "Hey, there was such a." But I had a friend that I went to school with that was like a really, really big New Edition fan. So
Okay, 1 second. Your audio again.
it's going out again.
Are you using earbuds? Yeah, it's like
Nah,
breaking up.
nah, I don't have
No?
AirPods on.
I'm not sure what's happening, but it like breaks up and then it lags. And I
I
just
don't
want,
know.
everybody to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not
It's good
sure.
right now. Then like you can't then we start it just I don't know what
Yeah,
happened.
there's no pods on or nothing. I'm just sitting still.
Okay, I'm not sure what yeah, I keep getting a little bit of
I mean,
comments.
I hear some kind of static or something that's going on.
You hear static? You hear it from me?
Yeah, I hear like it's like a staticky line a little bit.
Okay, let me see. Okay, I think we're good.
All right, how does it sound to you?
Okay, sounds good now. Now, okay, let's start off from you were in IHOP after college. They just had student takeover. You go to IHOP one night and you
Yeah,
meet.
so this is like, during the period where the school is shut down. So I'm just,
Mhm,
just out of school. So I see him, and I'm thinking about it's a buddy of mine. I know he's a big fan with this shit. So he doesn't live too far from where we at, the restaurant we at. We on this side of
mhm,
town. So I go to the payphone to call him and say, yo, he's up here. You want to come get yourself an autograph or whatever. This is that number. Come on, or if you want me to, get one for you, I do that. So
mhm,
he he didn't answer the phone. So it was a little late too.
mhm,
So but it was like I think it was like a Friday night or Saturday night, something like that. I think it was Friday night. So and so when I go to hang the phone up and turn around, Mike is standing there. And he says, "Yo, can let me use the phone." So the funny thing is this: is that I'm like, "Oh, okay, cool." The wild part is that earlier that week, you have to go back a couple days into the middle of the week. I got
mhm,
a call from my uncle, and he had told me that he was watching BT, and he was like, "Hey, man, the guy from New Edition was on there, and he was talking about he have a company, and he's looking for artists and producers, and he put this address up. You can send your tape. I wrote the address down for you." So I'm like, "Okay, cool." So I wrote it down, but I'm thinking in my mind like, because you hear these rumors that if you send stuff and that people would steal your stuff. So I just it was kind of like in one ear and out the other. But now I'm standing
yeah.
remember that my uncle said, I'm like, "Yo, didn't you say that, you looking for people? Or he's like, yeah, but you."
Wait, 1 second again. It's happening again. It's happening again. Okay, let's see how we can fix this. Okay. Namdi said, "Can you leave and rejoin the chat?" I mean,
Sure.
leave, rejoin. Yeah, we just want to hear
Yeah.
everything I say.
Okay, I got you. I got you.
Thank you, Raw and Uncut Mac. Thank you. Hello, Emily. Sorry, you guys. We're just having a little tech,
It's
but we're
cool.
gonna get it right back on. Okay, we're good now.
Yeah. All right. Okay. So, like I said, I turn around. He's standing there, and he's like, "Yo, let me use the phone." I'm like, and then, like I said, in just that instant, I remembered, earlier that week when my uncle said, and I asked him, I said, "Hey, didn't you say you was looking for people to, do music, this, that, and that?" So he's like, "Yeah, what do you do?" I said, "I make music, right?" So he was like, "You any good?" I was like, "Yeah." So he said, "Okay, let me finish eating my food." He was like, "You got a tape or something?" I was like, "Yeah." So he's like, "All right, well, get your tape. If you got a car, we can listen to it." I said, "Yeah, it's one out there." So
Mhm.
he says, "I get it queued up, and when I finish my food, I come check it out." So I said, "Okay, cool." So I go, get in the car, to get the tape queued up and everything. And he came out just like he said, came out, got in the car, and we started listening to, some of the tracks that I was working on. And as we talking, he starts telling me about ABC and Boys to Men.
Mhm.
He was saying that he had these two different groups and, that he was working on and this, that, and the other. And so I'm asking him like, well, what you think? You like what you hear, this, that, and the other. And he was like, I said, you think you could work with, this particular track? He's like, nah, I think I could work with you. And I was like, all right, cool. So he's like, he said, listen, I know people is funny, about passing their music on. He said, but he said, I'll make a trade with you. He's like, look, he said, yeah, so this is Friday. So he's like, on Monday, I leave to go on this tour. And this was, I guess, the beginning of the Triple Threat tour. And he's like, I'm leaving on Monday. He's like, but I'm gonna be at my mom's house. He said, I'm gonna give you the number to my mom's house, and you let me live with your tape. And he said, but just make sure you call me, by Sunday, and we'll rap, and then take it from there. And that's what happened. You know what I mean?
Okay.
So, yeah. So I ended up, getting the number, and I gave him the tape. Of course, when I got home later that night, I called the number, right, just to make
Of
sure.
course. Yeah,
Right.
of course. Of course.
And his mom answered and was like, "He's not here."
Mhm.
I think I woke up. I'm sorry, Miss Bivins. But yeah, so it was, and then we finally did connect, like the next day, or
Mhm.
before he left, and we ended up just kind of just talking, and just about different music that was out at the time, and different records, and just kind of getting a feel for each other's, what you kind of like, what you
Yeah.
interested in. And the thing was, we really kind of liked the same type of stuff. When
Mhm.
we started talking about certain albums, it was like, well, yo, I like this record. Yo, that's my record too. And it was one of those type of things. So we, kind of, like I said, we was on the same page musically as far as what we liked, the type of stuff that we like.
Okay.
So then what he would do is he would ask me like, well, if you had to remix this record, what would you do? Whatever. It may have been a particular record that was out at the time, that was on the radio, or whatever. And he said, well, if you had to remix, what would you do? So I would say, well, okay, give me, a couple days, and I'll play something for you. I mean, there's no need to tell you. You got to hear it,
Right.
So I would, go and do something, and I play it back, and send it to him, or play it over the phone, and he'd be like, okay, okay, great. Then he would come with something else. But yo, what if you had a record like this record, but mix a little bit with that record? What you think that would sound like? So I was like, all right, give me a couple of days, let me, and I would go, come up with something. So we did this a few times, like, I guess that was his way of kind of testing where I was at, and the
Mhm.
type of stuff that I would make, and you know, and then after that, it was like I said, one day I was sitting at home, and he gave me a call, and was saying, yo, I want you to come to LA, and we're gonna work on it. They got one more song that they're gonna complete for ABC's album. So
Mhm.
it's like we're gonna come there and and work on that. So that was me actually going to California.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and actually working and making a record with ABC, and then it's called ABC. It ended up, I think, being
Mhm.
the last song on the album. Yeah, but yeah, so that was my very first, quote unquote, record that I made, and it was, it was a really really good time. Actually,
Good, good.
when I was there, it was they were actually working on another song too. It was a song that was on that album called Spider Man, and
Mhm.
actually, it was Dr. Freeze and Spider Man that did Poison. That they produced that, but then also Hitman Howie T that produced Treat 'Em Right for Chubb Rock, and he did a lot of the special ed records, and then he was also the DJ for the Real Roxanne too. So
Mhm.
he was there, kind of assisting, in the production of the stuff. So he was helping them, but then in turn, he ended up helping me, put this record together as well too.
Okay, nice. And I read in your biography that you were still a teenager at this point getting signed to Bib 10 as a
Yeah, I
producer.
mean, I had just graduated
Yeah.
like a few months before that. So yeah.
Okay, so you're this young, coming into the room with Michael Bivins and special ed's producer. Was there any pressure for you at that time, to get it right
Yeah, I
for
remember when I first walked in. I walked in. Mike had dropped me off at the studio. I was like, okay, go ahead in there, get set up. This, that, and the other. So when I walk in the room, it's two guys sitting there, and I'm
Mhm,
like, okay, he didn't say no. I ain't noticed somebody else was gonna be there. So when I walk in, I'm like, hey, how y'all doing? I'm like, I'm Rico. And then the guy said, oh, I'm Dr. Freeze. And then the other guy said, oh, I'm Howie T. Now, I knew the names, because, when you was into it, you would always read the names and covers and stuff. But
right.
neither one of them, I mean, Howie, I think, was in maybe a video or two, but not a lot. He wasn't really like in your face like that. So I didn't know, him by face at the time, but I definitely knew his work and I knew him by name. And of course, Freeze was, incredibly hot. He had Poison out, he had Color Me Bad, Sex You Up, Out Was Out, and a few other records. So, so when they said that, I'm looking like, okay. You know what I mean? So, but it was really, really cool. Like they really embraced me, and we really hit it off. So it didn't, whatever pressure that was there, they kind of help alleviate it.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
So, you work with so no, actually I want to go back to when he had you remixing. How did you know that you had a gift for like hearing something and just producing itself? Because I've always wondered how it worked. Like, do you hear the melody in your head first? Like, do you see it in a dream? Like, how do you form the
Yeah, I
music that
mean, you a lot of times, at least for me, right? And it's kind of like I would kind of get in trouble for this when I was younger, because I would be in school, and it's like, let's say the teacher's talking, and this, that, and other, and then all of a sudden, her mouth would still be moving, but I wouldn't be hearing nothing she said. All of a sudden, you would just start hearing, either existing music, or you would hear, just a melody or some type of a beat or something like that, and then you start either, beatboxing or banging on the desk or start humming it, and that was your only way at that time to, really kind of express it or get it out. But you didn't necessarily know how to say that. You just was looked at as disruptive, you know,
Mhm.
So that I would say that's like the early stages of it. You know what I mean? And then from there, once it was kind of like I think it was one Christmas where everybody got a keyboard. It was like how every Christmas is the one big the
One gift.
item, yeah, that every kid is that has to have. So this particular year, every kid got a keyboard, and I was one of those kids. So now it was like I had something that it was like, oh, okay, I could do this and I could do that. And then from there, it just graduated from the next thing to the next thing to the next thing and getting, better equipment and, more equipment. And then even like, like hanging around with, older musicians and the people that worked in studios and stuff like that and just watching all of those types of things, were real pivotal. And then back then they had like, they had magazines for people that were interested in, they had, keyboard magazine, they had electronic musician magazine. There was so many different, outlets, just like they had fan magazines for the artists. For
Mhm.
people that was involved in that part, they had those magazines that was out there. So you could, read up on certain things that would, pique your interest. You could see the next wave of equipment that was coming out, where the technology was going, and all that kind of stuff like that. So all of those kind of things was, what really kind of pulled me, really into it.
Okay, wow.
Yeah.
Like, I'm just like, how does this all come together? Like, is the lyrics first? Is the melody first?
It,
Just
it it can show up. It can show up a variety of ways. Sometimes you can get just words. Sometimes you just get a title, and from that title you can build everything. Sometimes you may get a bass line, or you may just get a specific beat that comes in your head, and then from there you start building. Sometimes if you're sitting at a piano or keyboard, you could just be playing certain chords, and the transitions of what you're doing. That's all of a sudden how you end up building a song. So it's a variety of things. Or even if you flipping samples and you listening to records and you hear a certain loop or certain thing, and it's like, okay, let me grab that, let me loop this, or let me chop this up. Or so all of these are different ways that it comes together. I think that I don't think it's one surefire way. At least not for me. But I mean, I think it can happen in a variety of different ways.
okay. Okay. So do want to shout out the comments right quick. Dwayne
Okay.
Adams says, shout out to the producer Rico Anderson.
Hey, shout out to Wayne Adams.
Anthony Hall says, amazing interview. I watched this week. Blessings to you all. Blessings to you.
Thank you.
So back to, you producing with Biv Entertainment and you have like ABC, but at the same time, Chris Cross was out at the time. So was it different
They came out right after that.
after?
ABC, yeah,
Okay.
ABC came out first, and then Chris Cross came out like maybe 6 months after that. Yeah.
Okay. So was it different producing for kids more than so as it would be for producing for adults?
Well, um, I would say that they were actually really, really, kind of easy, because by the time you figure that I had started working with them, they had already, like done a bunch of records with Dallas Austin, and they, had so they'd already, had experience working in the studio and recording songs. So they didn't it wasn't a thing where they had to be, kind of, ushered into it, or, that it was, unfamiliar for them. So when they came in, pretty much it was a matter of them just learning the song that they needed to learn, and just recording it.
Okay.
And then they, like I said, they were really, the vocalist that was, in the group. You had Red, you had Chris, Roro, all of them. They pretty much, came in and did the parts that they needed to do. And it turned out, what you hear on the record.
Naturals. Okay.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay,
So
cool.
yeah. So they were very easy. They were pretty easy to work with.
Mhm. So
Mhm.
Biv 10 is in the movement. You're working, you're producing.
Mhm.
What is one of your favorite memories of that time working with that company?
Uh, I would say probably one of the one that may stand out is when we did One for All for One, the
Mhm.
song that had all of the artists in it. So
Yeah, all the artists.
yeah, so it was kind of like, you figure most rap crews had like the what they call the posse cut, where you had everybody in there, like the symphony and this, that, and the other. But this one was, all of the artists that was under our banner. So some were R&B artists and some were, rap artists. So it kind of went back and forth between rap and singing and rap and
Mhm.
singing, so it just kind of blended that hip hop and R&B, which was, the era that we were in at that time.
It
Or at
seems
least the beginning of that. It was the
Mhm.
beginning of that era. Yeah.
Was that the first time that had been done where everyone from a record label like had a chance on a song?
Well, like I said, you would see that more like in hip hop and like in rap. You had, like I said, you had the record, the Symphony from the Juice Crew. You had before that, you had Self Destruction, where you had all of the
Oh yeah.
different,
Yep.
but they weren't
Mhm.
all under the same. They were, from different labels and companies. But like I was saying, you had the Juice Crew, they had the Symphony, you had uh I think even with NWA had a record where it was all of NWA plus DOC. I think it was on DOC's album, the Grand Finale or something like that. I think that was the name of it. But um, that was more common. That was more common to see it in rap. But for what we were doing, it was kind of like a combination of, the R&B artists and the rap artists that were all under the same company. So yeah, I guess you could say that may have been a first like
First, yeah.
that. Yeah.
So all the groups that were out at the time while you were there, was there anything or any strategies that you all had to make your artists sound different than the other artists that were out at the time?
Well, I mean, Boys to Men kind of ushered in, the new R&B groups that were, coming in. So
Mhm.
they had already set the tone, that a lot of the other ones were kind of patterning themselves behind. So, they were kind of, like I said, they were already, at the forefront of that. And then with ABC, them they were just being, just kids. They was young hip hop kids. They could sing, they could dance, and they could rap, and they was doing their thing. So they had a lane in a way to themselves. Even though Chris Cross was kids too, their thing was, still they were rappers. They didn't. sing and do all the other stuff that, ABC was doing. So that kind of separated them and they were in a lane to themselves. So, um, I mean, like I said, Boys to Men, they already had, the gifts that they had as far as being, incredible singers and all of that. So it was just a matter of just being able to capture it, and it happened, and all of the songs that you hear from them.
So, also in your biography, you speak a little bit about wanting to learn more about film composing. So, can you talk about that experience as well as some of your music that you do have in films?
Okay. Well, I kind of got interested in that, just because I used to, watch stuff and I would hear the music in the background. And even though a lot of times, it's there and it's kind of supposed to be subtle, you're supposed to kind of feel it and not really listen to it. But for me, I was kind of keying in on it to see exactly how, the mood of what they were doing, how they would, like what was, how were they doing that.
Mhm.
And then it wasn't until I think when I saw it was a movie that came out about Quincy Jones, and it touched on the same thing that when he actually started getting into that, and the studies that he did, and it showed him, going about composing and all of those types of things. So it was like, and then afterwards you would listen to the records and you would just say, how does this dude think of this? So, how did, and really it was just a thing that, once I figured out like, oh, okay, well, you're going to have to get a little bit more education so that you understand certain things about music where, a lot of the things that I may have been doing in hip hop previously, they were more, off of instinct, just your natural instinct of, what you hear, what you feel. But when you're dealing with different types of music and stuff like that, you have to, some of that, a lot of that stuff, you have to know what it is that you're dealing with. You can't just go off of necessarily how you just feel, because some of it involves theory, it involves, things that, formulas and things that have already been, laid out, and you have to come and get those building blocks and
Mhm.
educate yourself on it so you could take it and then do what you want to do with music.
Right.
Yeah.
So we know that you have some songs that you produced and worked on featured in films like White Man Can't Jump and
For
CB4.
for that one, that was a remix that I did for Boys to Men. So
Mhm.
that was still, like more like just making a record, but the record was just featured in the film. And then the same thing, it was a movie. It was funny. It was a movie about a performing arts school called Center Stage that came
Mhm.
out. And, I did I think I worked on the ending title for that. So it's a part of the soundtrack as a song, but it still plays, in the film as well. But actually as far as like really kind of like scoring, I was able to really kind of get a nice experience from that when I worked on the documentary for Michael Bivins' life, the
Mhm.
Hustle 617, yeah, the Hustle of at 617 Mike Biv, the documentary that was out. I worked on, scoring that as well as, worked on making sure, certain other songs, were in there, being the music director for the docu-film.
Mhm. So,
Yeah.
what is that full circle moment like? You went to study film scoring, and then you hear your music in these films that you watch on television or on the screen. What
hmm
does that do for you? Like, what is that feeling?
Um, I mean, it makes you feel good. It makes you feel good. I mean, you may be sitting there listening, I think, with a more critical ear than the average person, because somebody else is just listening and they may like it. You still listening for, is it this
Mhm.
a mistake here, there, whatever. But for the most part, you still, can kind of look at it and step back and say, okay, all right. I felt like a lot of the things, allow me to go outside of the normal realm of
Right.
music that I may, normally or have done before. So it allowed me to, really, really stretch out a little bit more. So that was, enjoyable to be able to do that. Anytime I think you can kind of stretch yourself or,
Mhm.
kind of give yourself a challenge or, approach something that you haven't done before, um, you always, have a really, really good feeling with that, especially, if you pull it off and it turns out really, really
Really
well.
good.
So
Yeah.
yeah. And the dog did. It turned out really well. It ended up
Mhm.
going to number one.
Yes.
Yeah, on the
Amazon.
AMC
Yeah.
network, yeah. So, so we were all proud of that.
One thing I really love about your story is that you don't put yourself into a box. You start in some examples that I've heard just listening to you is like you start in drama, but then you get into music, you start in producing, but then do you want to get into film scoring? And so now you talk about stretching yourself. We know that you also have like a whole album dedicated to EDM and you made, a radio station dedicated to go-go music. How do
Mhm.
you how does that happen for you to just stretch yourself so wide and into all these dipping pots that you're interested in?
I call it being musically bipolar. No,
Okay.
no. And no disrespect to that. It's just making a joke. But it's just
Mhm.
saying that some people may get into music, to a specific genre of it. Whereas I think for me, I embraced it just as music as a whole.
Mhm.
And, when you kind of um, lend yourself to listening to different stuff and not just listening to it, but then if you can, interpret it and maybe even attempt to even write that type of, you have a different appreciation for it.
Mhm.
And I've learned to be able to appreciate a lot of different types and genres of music. And they a lot of them have piqued my interest. So a lot of times if it's something that I hear that is interesting, I like to listen to it and hear more of it. But then at some point I may decide like, okay, let me try this, myself. Kind of like, I mean, almost like a cook. If you're a
Mhm.
foodie, but you like to cook, right? So you try a bunch of different foods, but then at the same time, you go home and you'll get the recipe for this and the recipe for that, and you'll try to, make it yourself to see if it tastes the same way as the other thing that you like, or how good you actually did at it. So it's kind of the same type thing that
Okay.
way, just kind of like just really having a palette for a variety of things and not necessarily just honed into just one specific thing.
Mhm. Okay. Okay. Okay,
Because
nice. Thank
you'll find out too that the
you.
more that you get into all of it, there's so many things that are, kind of similar and, that they all have, something that you can appreciate about them. But a lot of times it's just, if you're able to be interested enough to, be able to appreciate it.
Okay. So can you talk a little bit about your EDM album and what went into the
Yeah, that
production
was
of
yeah,
that
that was
to
yeah,
make
that happened. That actually happened, during COVID. So you figure we was just locked in the house, and when
that?
everybody else was going crazy, it was wonderful for me because I'm
Mhm.
sitting there like, wow, you know what? I got all of these sounds and all of this stuff that I've never used before, and I've never, even so. It just became like a really experimental period, and then experiment with one thing, a track ends up turning into a song, and then another song ends up turning into another song, and then another song. And then over time, before you know it, you look and it's like, wow, okay, this is a whole, kind of nice little body of work here in just, experimental mode. And
Okay.
so it was like, okay. And then I decided, okay, well, I'm gonna, throw this out here and really just see, just kind of like, how people, take to it. And I just wanted to hear it for myself like that, just to see that, that I could actually pull it off. So, like I said, it was a total experimental type of thing, but the wonderful thing is nowadays, with the way that kind of like music is, you know, presented to people now. You're able to, put stuff out that's, experimental and kind of, just experiment and go in a variety of different directions, where everything is not, you have to stay in this specific lane, you
Mhm.
know. Yeah, so that's what it was. It was just really enjoyable, just to kind of. It was enjoyable to do it, but then it was, enjoyable just to say, okay, you know what, I'm actually going to make this something, and
Mhm.
put that out there, and then being a DJ too, from
Yes.
that angle, it's like I've DJed in a lot of different places, and I remember I was in Miami one time, and we were playing in this club. Um, Trying to remember the name of it. It's actually the same club where I think they used to film Drink Champs in at one point.
Okay.
But yeah, in Miami. But we playing in the downstairs part. But when that party was over with, you could hear all this bass and playing. So I ended up going up there, just kind of peeking my head in. And I'm thinking like, all right, this is kind of interesting. This is kind of cool.
Mhm.
And it was kind of like I caught it like a snapshot of what was happening. And then when I got back to, the equipment, it was like, it just kind of, started to come out like, all right, let me, experiment with this. Let me mess around with that. And that was just the vision that I had in my head of, like that particular audience, that particular crowd. And, just that whole thing. And I mean, and I like that type of music anyway. I mean, I think it's a part of the, to me, the way I see it, it's a part of the hip hop family. And, I mean, just the name alone, electronic dance music. So
Right.
you make it with electronic instruments, just like hip hop. People dance to it, just like hip hop, and it's music, just like
Mhm.
hip. So I see the parallels, of how they're related.
And for those that don't know what EDM music is, can you give a quick explanation as to what that is?
Um, I mean, it goes in. I mean, you have it's kind of like it's club music. It's house music. It's techno music. I mean, but then you have dubstep music. You have different variations of that. It's trap dub music, but they all kind of fall under the umbrella of the music that you hear at the club. That's at the big festivals. And so when you think of artists, kind of like someone like a Skrillex or a David Guetta or a DJ Snake or any of these type of guys like that, those are your EDM artists. And but I tell you, who's really also making his presence known in that area. Shaq is actually an EDM DJ now. He goes by the name of DJ Diesel. Yeah. Yeah.
Nice.
So but and that's the thing is like I think it's one of those things where, because sometimes we may look at stuff, and if we see the audience and we don't necessarily see that it reflects us, we could sometimes feel like it may not be for you. And I don't necessarily look at that way. Like I said, I kind of look at it the same way. you know um Hip hop kind of started out in a way where um it was something where it was totally experimental. It didn't have to have a specific formula at the time. It wasn't in no type of a cookie cutter situation. Everything was kind of different. All the arrangements were kind of different. The sound selections was just different. The
Yeah.
tempos were just totally different. It would have, a hook where it was nothing but scratches. But now the scratches hook from hip hop is the drop on EDM.
Hmm.
When the beat builds up, dun, 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 then and everything comes down. That's the same rush feeling that you would get, let's say, when Public Enemy goes into Terminator exit. He starts to transfer. It's that same type of thing. It's to me, that's how I kind of like interpret it. And then it has an element of some of the same kind of that same sort of reckless feeling of rock and roll too, with the distortion and the noise and just the,
Yeah.
yeah, and the lights and all that. So it's kind of like, it kind of combines those energies together. You know what I'm saying? Like I said, at least in my interpretation, that's how I kind of look at it, and I like that. I'm into that. You know what I mean? I like, rock stuff, everything from I loved Hendrix, I love, listening, Lenny Kravitz. But I mean like even like real, like other rock groups, your ACDCs and a lot of the other big ones I listen to, all of that stuff. It's all kind of like in the musical wheelhouse because it's all relevant. A lot of big rock records ended up being standard break beats in hip hop.
Hmm.
But the average person in the public, they just know the drum beat that they hear, but they may not necessarily know the actual song that it comes from.
Hmm.
So they may hear that beat playing in a hip hop R&B record, but the original song that it came from actually came from a hard rock song.
Right.
So
And that's
that's
what's
what
so
I said. I just like that. I like that, that blend, that blend of those energies, and textures like that.
that's what's so interesting about like someone that works like as a producer, just knowing where all these samples come from, like for each song in each album. And speaking of albums, what are some of your favorites that you have had a hand in?
Um, well, I would say, I mean, all of them. They've been enjoyable. Working on ABC was great. Working on the East Coast Family album was great. Um, Working on BBD's, second album was, it was really, really incredible. Working on the Three Stripes album, with them, it was really, really good too. So, like I said, I don't know if I mean, you asked me about, I guess, the one moment or whatever, and I said the one where everyone, just because I think that was a kind of a one of a kind type of, moment like that. So, that one stands out there. But I mean, I would say, that all of those, projects have been enjoyable, to work on. The artists were enjoyable to work with, and I had a good time, participating in doing it, you know.
What a time to be alive.
Exactly. Yeah. It was, I mean, it was a great time. It was a really, really great time. That whole time frame. Just imagine you had, nowadays when we speak of that period, we have so many artists that have passed away,
Hmm.
but it was a time where
And
everybody was all there together. You know what I
it's,
mean? And then you would see, all of these folks just kind of was,
mhm.
around and functioning and moving around. And it was a really, really great time to be around, and to be a part of. Because it wasn't just even in the music. You had the different comedians that were coming up at the time, the different actors and actresses that was coming up, the different, young directors that was coming up, the different fashion people that was coming up. So in all of these different directions, you were seeing all of these creative people and and these exceptional people just coming in and making a mark and just doing things. So, like I said, kind of like looking back and reflecting on it, when you was there, it was just normal, But looking back on it, if you had to really, I would really say it was really a great time, to really be a part of, that whole movement, that whole, that time frame in music,
It seems
especially.
like yeah.
Yeah, and I like that's what you all do. As far as the focus I think that you put on the New Jack era. I think it's you do a really really good job. Because you hear some talk about that, but you don't hear I think as much as you should for I think as big as an impact that whole sound and music was. I mean, really we still have some of that still out here today in the music, a lot of the components from that, like I said, still just a blend of R&B and hip hop continuing to constantly transform and evolve. Yeah.
As someone who I wasn't alive back then, but I just like, as someone who became a part of the halftime chat
Hmm.
team, Namdi, like my folk, because I'm someone just infatuated, with the past.
Hmm.
And oh gosh, I just wish I was there, but it's so nice to preserve these stories and legacies like
Yeah.
yours who have just had their moment in time, I like to say, within the music industry. So thank you.
Hmm.
Thank you.
Oh, well, thank you. Thanks for having a platform and an outlet, for us to talk about that.
No problem. Yeah.
Yeah.
So was there ever a comparison like when certain albums didn't perform like others? Like did you get like how did you feel when Hootie Mac probably didn't perform as well as the Poison album did or like other examples like that?
Something. It was kind of like then. You got to remember, it wasn't as I think a instant uh career turnaround type thing with artists. Then you figured you would have artists that put out multiple albums, and
Mhm.
some you may like more than others, or some may, have come at the right time, where some may have come at a time where they may have been, off a little bit. So I don't think it was as much of a thing of if this didn't perform as well as that, because a lot of times it was okay, well, we're gonna work on something else, or we're gonna come up with whatever the next thing. Whereas you figure you have so many different artists that put stuff out now, that if some one thing doesn't work, then a lot of times it's a wrap. You know what I mean? Whereas then it was more of a, okay, you know what, let's go regroup and figure out, like what we need to do. And then a lot of times with stuff too, it's a lot of things are just timing. That it's just timing. If things, come and happen at the right time, um, you see that level of success. And sometimes, you may have, some really great songs, but let's just say if the timing of when they come out, or certain things, it's a lot of other variables that come into play, especially when you deal with record companies and things of that nature. So that these are the things that sometimes can affect the outcome
Mhm.
of what you see, as what is successful, and what may not be, or deemed as successful, and what may not be.
Okay. Okay. So like speaking of timing
Hmm.
purposes, working with like an early Boys to Men and seeing just how long their legacy lasts to still performing like 30
Hmm.
years, how does it feel knowing that, you worked with them when they first came out
I
in
mean,
two,
it's
like,
it's it's really, really, it's incredible. I mean, like I said, just any of the artists that you work with that are really, really exceptional, really, really great artists, you enjoy it. And the thing I took away, I remember when we worked on the Simpin remix. Um, we kind of, they ended up singing the verses and doing everything over again. So, even though it was a remix, we kind of redid the song, and working with them in the studio. I mean, they were really, really, just pleasurable, because, they came in, it was like, okay, they was prepared, and they would say, they would do a take, and like, you like that? Okay, I can give you something else, or, this, that, and the other. And it wasn't a problem, trying to get anything, from them. So, that's what always makes it that much more enjoyable and that much more memorable. Same thing, working with BBD, same thing. They come in and they ready to go. They know what they're gonna do. All of them know their parts. Each one comes in, they feed off of each other, they help each other. And before you know it, the record is done.
Mhm.
So, like I said, anytime you have those type of artists, and it helps that you have artists that have humble personalities, that that are really have a lot of humility about themselves. And like I said, that time when we worked together, that was cool, because they were really, really humble like that, as well as like I said, working with BBD and a lot of the other acts that I work with. They, a lot of them were very, very humble, regardless of whatever the stature that they have. Will Smith was the same way.
Yeah.
He was very, very humble. He walked in talking about, "Hey, hi, I'm Will," and I'm like, "I know who you are,"
Yeah.
you know. So but very, very humble. Very, very humble, and so I think that when you can have that type of experience, with artists, and when you're working on projects, like I said, that makes everything that much more enjoyable.
Mhm. So outside of Biv Entertainment, working with artists like Maya and Fat Joe and Will Smith, how did you transition into working with them? Like, was it just a networking thing, or
Yeah,
how?
I mean, it was just like, I mean, when you're working on stuff, of course, you end up, dealing and meeting other people that work at other labels that have other artists, and then sometimes it may be that somebody is working on a project, like with the situation with Fat Joe. That was working on this project that was for Rucker Park, the basketball tournament that they have in Harlem. They were putting out DVDs, just kind of capturing the whole vibe and the energy that was going on up there. I think this particular year was the year that Kobe Bryant ended up coming to the park. So they had all of that, captured there. And this was actually like the soundtrack that was going to be for that actual DVD. So, and that working on the soundtrack, it was, being able to work with different artists, that was doing songs on there. And Fat Joe having actually, this was kind of like the first combo of him and Remy Ma, I think right before they did Lean Back. It was, something that they did feature on there. Yeah. Um, and like I said, he was, great to work with too. He came in, he listened to the beat and wrote his rhyme right then and there in the studio, you know. Yeah, wrote his rhyme right then and there in the studio and laid it down and did his thing. Remy was the same way. She came right in and knocked out what she needed to knock out.
Nice.
Yeah. So
So I'm a
you
huge fan of Maya and all of her work. What was it like
with
producing?
her with hers, that was a remix situation. It was a
Mhm.
soundtrack. It was a soundtrack for a film. And I think it's a movie that Jamie Foxx was in called Debate. And uh, a friend of mine was working at the label that put out the soundtrack, and they wanted to have a remix done to the song. So I ended up doing the remix for that.
Okay, cool.
Yeah,
Nice, nice. Wow,
yeah.
very
Hmm.
career. So let's talk about what you're doing now, with
Okay.
Remix Entertainment, your company, and what
Hmm.
can we look forward to you doing now and in the future?
Okay. Well, right about now, like I had mentioned earlier, I was doing scoring and music, directing for the docufilm that Michael Bivins had
Mhm.
for his life. So now we have another project that's kind of like a spinoff from that, that's going to be coming out, dropping really, really soon. So it's a bunch of brand new music by a bunch of, it's some legendary artists that that'll be on there. I can't really give you a whole lot just yet. You know what I'm
Nice.
saying? But it's going to be artists from the family, that's featured on
Mhm.
there, and then there's going to be some that and then some that you expect, and some that you don't expect, and then a few new artists that will be featured, on there as well. So that should be dropping, I would say, like in the next couple of months, and we just kind of getting things together and setting up for the release for it. And, really want to make sure that it, has the right rollout for it, so just taking our time and putting it together the right way. I mean, it took us a minute to put the project together just because of the different artists that we worked with.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're dealing with people's schedules and this, that, and the other, and then even just making sure that it's the right song, or did we need to, fix something with the track, or did we need to fix something with this? So all of those type of things that we put into that to make sure that it was a really, really great project, and that it will really, really hold up to a standard, that we all have. So that's going to be, coming out, like I said, in the next couple of months before the year's out. And
Okay.
then I'm going to be still doing, more things in the television and film area as far as composing music and making music, and same thing with the DJing. I still go and DJ parties, all over the country. I still, do that, and I probably still, tinker around with my EDM stuff as well too, and make another project with that, because for me it's just a great musical release, just in a whole nother direction.
Right.
So yeah, so as long as I guess I can do all of that, kind of, do the stuff that I know and that I like to do, but then also be able to, kind of experiment and do some other things and kind of broaden my horizons and stretch out. I'm happy.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah,
So if anybody wanted to get in contact with you to book you for, music scoring or being a DJ at
yeah,
theirs,
yeah,
how can
yeah. You could. Now the thing is, I just got a brand new IG. I had to get brand new social media because my all of my stuff had got hacked. So I was not on social media for like a long time. So I'm just starting to
Mhm.
get back on and rebuild it. But my new IG is official underscore Rico Anderson. So they could go there. They could also go to remixentertainment.com. That's my website for my company. You can reach me there. And yeah, pretty much, I mean, and I think on TikTok, I'm on is Rico Anderson Music. So they could follow me there as well too.
Yeah, because we definitely want to stay up to date, with everything that you yourself are doing. And
Okay.
so I guess my one of my final questions would be, you work in an industry that's very, legendary field, and you yourself are making your legacy, but what do you want your legacy to be?
Um, I would like it to be that I was good at my craft as a producer and a musician and songwriter. But also say, but I was also a good person as well at the same time. So I like to be known for my craft, but I also want to be known for my character as well too. So I would
Okay.
say, as long as both of those things, in a positive direction, I think you got a pretty good legacy there.
Thank you. Yes, I agree. Well, everyone, this is the legendary Rico Anderson,
Well, I
producer,
think,
artist,
I mean,
musician,
you say that,
DJ,
I like that.
all trades.
Okay,
Yes.
okay,
Thank
all
you
right.
so much for being here. It's my first
Thank you
interview.
for having me. I do appreciate
Thank
that.
you. Thank you. Thank you
And
so
thank
much.
you. Okay, take care and continue
You
success
too.
in everything that you all are doing.
Thank you. Same to you. Thank you so
All
much.
right. All right, take care.
You too.
Hey guys, thanks for watching. Thanks for being a part of Halftime Chat. Please remember to subscribe, share, and comment. But most importantly, why don't you become a member of Halftime Chat? We've got amazing videos, amazing perks, and being able to support the channel. But anyway, thanks for watching. Take care.
I never participated in that kind of.
And somewhere in between
us for even loving us, on which I did miss you with.
What was it like growing up?
She's still making an impact on 4 houses down.
I have a couple pieces.
trying to get this one and that one.
That works for you, but just for me,
No, okay, okay.
They understand what Joseph Boyz II Men and all